for joining us. This is Paul Wilson.
Chris Hemke.
And you're listening to Diesel Performance Podcast. Chris, we got a stacked episode today.
What a show we have today, man. I'm really pumped.
I am too. Guys, we're going to hear from our super tech, Jeremy Garnett, and our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, a little bit later in the show. Right at the top, we are going to be able to hear from Clint Cannon of ATS Diesel. Chris, do you want to intro this?
Yeah,
this is a pretty big deal for you.
There's been a couple really cool videos that the boys over at ATS have been sharing, and they've been going viral. And that's regarding their new to the market Allison conversion for the 4th gens and 5th gen Rams.
We've seen Allison conversions before.
You know, I cringe every time someone talks about doing these conversion projects. But a couple weeks ago, I was talking to one of the employees of ATS on a trip I was on, and he was giving me some of that inside scoop, and like I got really excited. Like it sounded like someone, and if there's going to be someone in this industry, Clint and ATS as a whole have those resources to make this possible. But they've literally checked every box on what a conversion kit would need to have to be viable in a day-to-day workload. So I'm really excited to know more about this, because reality is anytime you get on the phone with a guy and he's talking about a truck, and I love hey, I'm looking to buy a new truck, can you make a recommendation? Like my eyes roll. Like I really don't like those calls, right? Because it's like it's at the end of the day, it's based off of a preference.
Yeah.
So I could tell you that, oh man, I love this truck, and they're going, fuck you, I like this more. Well, then don't ask me my opinion. But
damn, that got aggressive.
But commonly enough, you always get the guys, man, I just wish I can get a Cummins with an Allison. Like that is always the conversation of, oh, well, the Ram trucks aren't that great because the transmissions are shit, but man, they got a great motor.
Yeah.
So here's a viable option to where you could put the badass trans behind the badass motor.
Well, that's what we used to say. You got a Cummins wrapped in a Dodge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. So
and they've come along, but
they've made a step or two.
One or two.
Guys, make sure you stick around. Right after a word from our sponsors, we're going to be coming at you with that conversation we had with Clint Cannon from ATS Diesel.
Increase the durability, line pressure, and performance of the Allison transmission in your GM 6.6-liter Duramax LML and L5P with the XDP EPC solenoid Fuller plug. From the factory, the EPC solenoid increases line pressure up to 230 psi during shifting. Once the shift is complete, the pressure drops back down to 80 psi. At 80 psi of line pressure, your Allison cannot hold the added stress from aftermarket upgrades or heavy towing. The XDP EPC solenoid Fuller fixes this issue by installing onto the solenoid and back into the valve body. This lets your transmission effectively operate at 230 psi all the time. This eliminates clutch slipping, poor shifting, and extends transmission life. To find out more about the XDP EPC solenoid Fuller plug, check out xdp.com or find a local dealer near you.
I want to talk to you listeners today a little bit about Worley Custom Fabrication. We've been working with the guys over at WC Fab since the shop is open, literally. We've always had a great friendship and relationship with Jason Worley and Ryan Worley and the whole crew over there. And one of the reasons that relationship has lasted for 15 years plus is because we get the same consistent high-quality parts and excellent customer service from them every time. If you guys are looking for any of the parts or products that WC Fab can supply, I blindly and wholeheartedly totally recommend them to you. Exergy Performance is the leader in high-performance diesel fuel systems. When you go around to UCC, when you go around to competitions, when you look at Levon Miller and other amazing competitors who have crushed it and dominated this space, you'll see consistently Exergy Performance is what their injectors and their fuel pumps are provided by. And that is because they're using the highest levels of technology to develop and process your orders. So you're not getting an injector that somebody hit with a screwdriver to hone it out. You're not getting something that some fly-by-night shop tried to tweak some 50-year-old equipment to try to hack together a set of modified injectors. You're getting OEM quality. You're getting the absolute best possible thing for your truck. And when it comes down to your fuel system in a diesel, there may be no part that's more crucial to have a very, very high, ridiculous standard for quality. If you're considering upgrading your fuel system in your diesel truck, you need to contact one of the distributors or you need to contact Exergy Performance directly because they're going to get the job done right and you're going to be really happy with it. Clint Cannon, how the hell are you?
I'm good. Good to talk to you guys again today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We're excited to have you.
So, Clint, obviously, Clint's the owner of ATS. You've been around the diesel performance industry for a long time. I'd say about as long as diesel performance has been happening in a relevant way for us.
Yeah, that's an understatement.
Yeah, just a couple years. I think we're turning 30 years almost, and next year I think it'll be 30 years for ATS.
Holy moly!
Insane.
Yeah,
that is just.
No, I'm feeling old.
Now, you started it when you were 5, so you're not that old. We'll keep that age discreet. But Clint, I thought maybe for our newer listeners, could you give us a little bit of a rundown of ATS and kind of your history in diesel performance?
Yeah, so ATS, I started out as a transmission shop in '93. And then, shortly after that, moved into rebuilding torque converters. And then, of course, the diesels came out, and right about that time is when, I found a need for, a multi-disc converter, and that's basically was the invention or the creation of the famous triple lock torque converter, which is what a mainstay today, for forever. And that's basically the kind of how that whole deal happened. And then as we kept moving along, we kind of moved into building, just other diesel components and products. And as they kind of moved along, it just went from one thing to another. And today we, pretty much design, machine everything. All upstairs, we're in a 110,000 square foot warehouse, or big metal building, which ironically previously was an EPA building. For the U.S. government, which is kind of interesting, but being where the irony that we're in an EPA building now is kind of funny for this day and age. But
yeah,
when that all circles around, we started building turbochargers and just torque conversion, transmission packages, and electronics, and all these things that fit around the diesels. When they came out and when the Cummins really hit the market, in '95, the 12 valve, as we all know, is just legendary. And, guys that throw a fuel plate in it and some governor springs and a bigger turbo, and next thing you know, the transmission has no ability, to hold any power. So we continue to, work on the transmission packages and the torque converter and all that other stuff. And, over the years, it evolved into what it is today. ATS doing pretty much everything under the hood, drivetrain, powertrain for, these diesel pickup trucks.
It's crazy, Clint, when you think about, you mentioned a 94 12 valve, doing a couple simple bolt-ons, transmissions, the 47 RHs, the 47 REs, and then you get into the newer 48 REs. To today's, the 68s, it's all the same shit. You add a little bit more power, and the transmission just can't keep up.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, then we get into the newer transmissions when they all became, they used to all be synchronous, and then they all turned into this non-synchronous operation, which means there's clutch-to-clutch operation. And, the computer has to control when the clutch applies, when it releases. And that creates a whole nother dynamic of issues that we have to deal with in the aftermarket. We have to make sure the computers can keep up, with the rapid power increase of these diesels when you turn them up, but also the transmissions kind of have gotten smaller over time, and one of the 68 RFE, when you talk about that, it's basically, we all know it's basically a gasoline transmission that they put a diesel torque converter in front of it. And the saving grace for the 68 generally is having, derate and defuel capabilities, so the engine kind of turned down, and one of the big reasons why they are pretty reliable, on stock applications. Then of course, as soon as you tune them, as soon as you turn them up, then so much of that's gone, and the parts just aren't big enough, right? So it really doesn't give you a ton to work with.
It's so funny you say that. I was just watching somebody who called the 68 RFE a caravan transmission, which just always brings a smile to my face for all you caravan owners out there.
Well, it's also crazy to think about, You think of like the 47RH, 47RE, that is a spin-off off of like a Torque Flight 727 that used to be in all the old muscle cars in the 70s. Like those casings are all real similar. Am I correct with that, Clint?
Yeah, no, that nothing. And, Chrysler's MO has always been continue to regurgitate technology. And, the original push button, if you guys have, for us old guys that remember, and this was an old movie to me, but National Graffiti.
Yeah.
When they have the cop car and he wraps a chain around the rear axle, then they go and run off and the cops start hauling ass and following them. That's an old push button power glide, right? Well, in '64 is when the original cast iron power glide, or the the aluminum power glide, the aluminum Torque Flight 8, which became basically the 727, right? Well, literally that valve body that's in a 1967 push button 3-speed automatic Chrysler will bolt into a 2006 48 RE and actually work. So, so that gives you an idea, like that technology had been around for so long. And, all Chrysler did is, later on, in 96, they whacked off the governor and they put a solenoid in place of it to emulate governor pressure, right? And instead of redesigning the transmission and making a newer technology, getting rid of the band and, making it more of a state-of-the-art transmission, they just continued to regurgitate parts all the way until the 6.7 Cummins came out. And, finally, when the 6.7 came out, they put the 68 behind it, and the 68 is literally a regurgitated 545, right? And the 545 was grown up from the 604, which is your Caravan transmission. So, it's unbelievable, what Chrysler has done, to save pennies, and they've managed to get away with it. But, when you look at the way these things are built, even the material in the valve body, the material in the case is so porous, and it's such a cheap material that the stuff wears out and it doesn't have any integrity. The 68 RFE, is known for cracking in half, right? That's why you build the case brace that goes to the top of it, because the case breaks in half, and there's nothing you can do with that in the aftermarket short of putting a brace on it. Chrysler could have used a little bit better material, but again, not to be bagging on Chrysler, because they keep us. I love Chrysler, and they keep us in business, and half our product line is around that, but it really does leave a lot to ponder about, and a lot to improve on.
I love that you came on the podcast and in the first 5 minutes just bashing on Chrysler engineers. He's
thanking them. He's thanking them for business.
Thanking them for being so horrible at their jobs. No, but it is funny to me, because I think you make some really valid points there about the lack of technology, and that's something that we've heard about forever. Chris, how many guys have been on the show who said the ultimate dream diesel is a Ford chassis with a Cummins engine and an Allison transmission?
I think in the 2000s, that held true. I don't hear that as much these days, because I do think like the Ram platform has advanced so much, and they are very much a luxury vehicle. You still get the solid front axle, but people still complain about the transmission. So what I get more these days is, I would love to have a Ram with an Allison. Why didn't they do that from the factory?
Yeah. Well, I know. So you've been driving a built Allison, had the ATS twin kit on it, running a Stealth now, and had a lot of experience with driving these 68s. And you and I have been back and forth with driving your truck and feeling different levels of built transmission, because I think that truck's life first started with like a stock transmission and too much horsepower, and then just a converter. What was the life on that?
A valve body and a converter. We did an ATS valve body and a converter upgrade, and we had the 68 built. The thing kind of follow with Clint on is, even in like the 68 world, and you throw an insanely amount of money, because it's very expensive to build a 68. Yeah. The transmissions still don't drive very nice. Nothing compared to like what an Allison or a built Allison would be.
It's not. No, Clint, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Because I got to watch one of the really cool videos you guys did where you compared in depth an Allison versus a 68 RFE, and I thought that was a really cool kind of concept. Can you give our listeners kind of a recap of like what are some of the basic differences? Why do people not love the 68?
Well, I'll tell you, it even kind of goes beyond the 68. It even kind of reaches into the ASIN 68 and the 69. So, it's pretty long-winded, but in to kind of keep it basic, the 68 RFE, like say that tranny works really well when it's more factory power levels. And, you know, it has a great gear ratio. You know, the problem is it's just not very big, right? So when you start demanding on it a little bit, like putting a lot of weight, you know, behind your vehicle, or turning your engine up at all, you know, or basically abusing these trucks like all of us do, you know, the 68 is just so limited, primarily because of its size and the overall design of it. You know, when you go to overdrive, so really fourth, fifth, or sixth gear, the 68 RFE has a tremendous mechanical disadvantage on the overdrive clutches. So almost no matter what you do, no matter how quickly you get them on or how much pressure you squeeze them, you know, they're just limited on how much power they can hold without getting a slow slip, and then you burn up the overdrive clutches. And, you know, a lot of other things in the transmission, you know, the 68 RFE, the pump is not big enough. The hydraulics are not designed optimally. The planets aren't very big. The clutches are small. The cases, I mean, it's overall, like I say, it's kind of a gas tranny. So when you get into the you know, being able to hold power on a 68, and when I say abuse it, you know, put a skid steer on the back and a load of bricks and, you know, a trailer, and you just start using this thing every single day, the 68, you know, just doesn't really have the meat, you know, to really make it super reliable. So you're kind of limited based on how far you can go. Now, when you get into like the 07 to 12 68 RCs, which is the ASIN trannies, then you kind of have the same problem, because it was too small of a transmission, and it has a massively under-designed input shaft, and the hydraulics you can't really modify much. And then you get into the 69 RC, which is the 13 to current. That's a really pretty heavy-duty transmission, but there's no tuning for them. You have to derate the engine when you're under power. The more power you make, the more you have to derate the engine. So it feels like a Volkswagen, you know, with the Triptronic, you know, where their technology is literally you lock it into gear and then accelerates really hard, and then as soon as it begins to make the shift, then the engine derates literally like you take your foot off the throttle, and then the shift takes place and the clutches engage, and then it gives it power again, right? So it's almost like the demand for this Allison setup that we've got is about 50-50, whether it's 68 RFEs or the 69 ASIN, for the two reasons, right? But in essence, I mean, the big deal is the Allison transmission. What's so cool about the Allison 1000, it has the perfect gear ratio. So your low gear to your double overdrive, you know, fifth and sixth is the double overdrive. So the RPM drops are perfectly dropped, you know, between first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. But what really makes the Allison work so well in such a good candidate is it's a direct copy of the medium duty, the 3000 series, which is a monstrous transmission. I mean, that the 3000 series transmission is like the size of the Cummins motor. I mean, it's huge. It comes behind all the 8.3s, and it's just big. So they essentially took the 1000 and they shrunk it down just a little bit, and it's a medium duty transmission that is going behind our regular trucks, right? So it's such a big transmission. The clutch packs are huge. The planetaries are huge. I mean, the input shaft is huge. You know, if you go back and kind of reference that video that I did, you know, I kind of do step by step and show, you know, each shaft and the clutches and all the other components. But the other thing that makes it really a nice setup is it has a very simple, it's complicated, but it's a very simplistic hydraulic system, which means the hydraulic system is not full of inherent high mileage problems. So you can control it, and the Allison TCM that we use in this package is also, it's tunable by the general public, right? You can plug EFI Live into it. So now we can utilize a factory calibration. I mean, we send out a calibration with our setups, but the end user has the ability to go and tweak shift points up, down based on the gear ratio and the tire size and what turbo or turbos you're running, you know, everything. So it's very open architecture. And that was one of the big reasons why, you know, we really chose the LCT 1000 platform to work on, because it is open kind of architecture. We have all the heavy duty parts in the world, and it just doesn't break. So, when you start getting into kind of the nuts and bolts, the aftermarket, we've been putting Allison transmissions into, behind the Cummins for several years now. I mean, for like 10 years. The problem is, and it's not just ATS. I mean, there's a lot of guys out there that have been, getting the transmission behind the engine. Well, there's kind of two major problems, right? The first problem is getting the transmission to bolt up behind the engine. To get it, when you bolt it up behind the engine, you have to have the right setup, which means in order to get it to bolt up, you either have to build some kind of adapter plates or whatever, or get like an SAE type bell housing and change the adapter plate on the Cummins. And doing that, it's huge, and it's just lumbersome, and it's like too long, and so these adapter plates came out. And then the adapter plates, you would remove the backing plate from the back of the engine and then bolt on this aftermarket backing plate. Well, unfortunately, because of the bell housing design of the Allison, you pretty much are forced to relocate the starter. So take the OEM starter off of the engine and then relocate it to the other side and put the 6-liter starter on it, which, the 6-liter starter is this little gear reduction starter. And they're not reliable, right? But most impactive, what I did not like, is you have to grind like literally an inch out of the block by like 6 inches. I mean, you have to grind the block out. I mean, it's like an hour's worth of grinding, and you get like CGI block or whatever, and that's really terrifying, because then all of a sudden you're creating all these stress risers. But regardless, whether it's a 12 valve or a 2000 or a 21 6.7, I mean, you literally have to grind the block out of it, grind, so the starter will tuck up by it, by the casting. And holy cow, man! I mean, if you ever see that, you're just like, you grit your teeth, like, man, do not ever want to do that to my engine. Like, I don't think any of us ever want to like grind that kind of material off the block of your engine. So what we did is, just took a step back and like, let's build like an OEM style transmission that's going to bolt up to this thing. So what I did is we basically just designed this really beautiful bell housing that replaces the bell housing from the factory, from the Allison, and then this bolts on, so it's the pump housing, converter housing, special converter. So the entire transmission assembly is a 100% direct bolt-in replacement. I mean, like, you drop your 68 out of the vehicle, and without even changing the flex plate, right? Just take the transmission out and bolt the Allison up there, and it 100% bolts up to the bell housing. The torque converter, we designed it so it emulates the front end of a 68 RF, so it bolts right to the flex plate. And then all your brackets, over the top, all your wiring harness and your cooler lines, all that stuff, that bolts right onto the bell housing. The wire harness that we supply, the whole deal, which I'll kind of get into that in more detail, but it uses all the factory looms, the cooler lines even. Everybody's familiar with the cooler bypass block that every 68 or ASIN should ever have, right? So we supply a new block that plugs into your factory cooler lines, and then that block has the cooler lines that go right to the transmission. So literally everything about this is 100% plug and play, and it's just beautiful. I mean, everything bolts up. Even the splines on the transfer case, we've changed the outlet shaft stuff around in the adapter plate, so it all bolts up the factory transfer case. Some of these kits, you don't even have to do driveline changes, because we've kind of compensated for that in the bell housing or the transfer case. Sometimes you have to shorten the driveline and lengthen it. Sometimes we add a spacer. So it kind of depends on what year and what size truck it is exactly. I mean, I think right now we have like 17 different kits. Whether it's an early or a late 68 or a 69 or whatever it is. So every single part of it, and then to get things even better, even having the bell housing where the transmission would just bolt into the vehicle still didn't get us where we needed to be. In fact, that was maybe half of it, right? First thing you want to do is make the hard parts bolt in, but the hard part about it is, with these vehicles, which, you know, you guys are brutally aware how this works. I mean, we get these calls, right? The vehicle is all integrated. Like, you can't just take a transmission out of these vehicles anymore and have the TCM not be in the circuit. All of a sudden, the engine computer is looking for the transmission computer, and it's not communicating with the BCM. So this whole CAN network, you know, everything has to work together. And as soon as you take your 68 out, then it's like, whoa, wait a minute, I don't have, like, I can't run. I don't know how fast I'm going. I don't know what gear I'm in. So then, you know, like the practice was, you know, some time ago before we came out with this kit, is flash the ECM to make it think it's a standard transmission, right?
Yeah.
Well, that fixes some things. It lets the engine run in that. But the things that don't work is your backup camera doesn't work, your push to start button doesn't work, which means you can't start it without running a wire down to the starter. The cruise control doesn't work. The dash, the park reverse neutral drive doesn't work. The transfer case doesn't go into low range anymore. So, like, all of these things, all of these creature comforts that, you know, we love so much about these vehicles, like, nothing would work. I mean, literally nothing would work because it was like flashed to a standard in it, and the computer doesn't have anything that it needs. So we really spent a lot of time on is working on basically a module that, or in some cases a few modules that fit between the transmission, the TCM that we're supplying for the Allison, and the body control module and the ECM. So we emulate and we now broadcast, and we take all that information from the Allison TCM and we pair it, and we basically translate it, which the module is called the translator. We translate all of that TCM information into language that the truck can understand, the BCM and ECM and go on. And then we take the same information from the truck and translate it back to the Allison. So now the Allison computer has all the torque requests. It knows exactly, you know, all the details of the truck. And most importantly, or equally as importantly, it allows all of the emissions components because it's not in the kind of a D-rate mode. So now this whole thing, the whole package works very seamlessly. I mean, in fact, this is, you guys you'll appreciate this. One of the things that I like to do is, after one's done, is plug the factory Chrysler scan tool into the engine, and you can read all the TCM data. And when you're looking at the data, it looks like it's coming from the factory Chrysler TCM, where in fact it's actually coming from the Allison. So we take that Allison information, translate it in, send it back to the vehicle, and then when you're reading this information, it tells you that it basically believes that there's a Chrysler transmission in the vehitle.
That is so cool.
You know, I mean, when we finally got to that level, we're like, this is cool. You know, it's just such a nice. It just gives you a nice peace of mind because you don't have to worry about the failure points anymore. You don't have to worry about it failing on you. You know, you can put some power to it. You can drive it like you stole it with your trailer behind it. You know, and it's just a very clean, you know, factory type install.
I mean, you're putting a lot of effort into the whole process, thinking an end user, I'm just going to swap an Allison. They're not thinking about the push button start, the backup camera, the 4-low, any of those things. And there are other conversions on the market that, you know, there's guys out there putting 48s behind, you know, a newer 6.7. And I don't see that being very efficient with, you know, losing your double overdrive, only having 4 gears. So this is kind of like an Allison, the Allison is a diesel specific trans in a medium light duty truck. You're able to bolt it in, but you're able to get all those creature comforts figured out so the truck operates as it did factory.
Well, can you just imagine from a tuner standpoint, Chris, how many Allison conversions have we had in the shop that have like a standalone TCM and then a different PCM running the engine, and
they all still have codes on the dash for this, that, or
guaranteed,
the other. Yep.
Guaranteed. And they're a nightmare to tune because nothing's talking to each other. So if you have a standalone TCM, your Allison in theory might shift great, but like engines talk to transmissions. That's the simplest way I could put it. And when they don't, your truck drives like garbage. This is really, really interesting. I was checking out some of that cool stuff where like you could still go on the dash and read your trans temp, which usually in anything with a conversion, like you're not using factory sensors to read anything.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the big deal that we, and that's frankly why we just released it. You know, we've been working on this for a couple of years now, but it took us quite some time to backwards engineer all that data. You know, because Chrysler they don't give you an annex, you know, that tells you what all these PIDs are and everything else. I mean, it's all just hours and hours and hours of backwards engineering data and just experimenting and working through it. You know, same as you guys do, and it just takes so long, but. You know, now that we kind of started working, you know, from the 20 or the 19 plus back, you know, just because there's such a demand for the newer trucks are so much harder, so it makes it a little bit easier to start going backwards. But the transmission temperature, the park, reverse, neutral, the tap shift, the tow haul, your exhaust brake, I mean, every function that your vehicle has from the factory works with our Allison conversion. And that really is the big difference. I mean, with that's what really sets us apart and has changed things. And that, frankly, that's why we started offering the kit, because we did a lot of Allison, you know, quite a few Allison swaps, you know, in the past that we would use, you know, an aftermarket TCM type thing, you know, and going through it. And it's just like you say. I mean, you lose so much, you know, of your drivability and your inherent problems, and with the world that we're living in, you know, I mean, in Colorado, we're pretty much like we're under the CARB standard. You know, if you're in California, everything is CARB. If you don't have a CARB number, it's not CARB approved. It doesn't work. If you have a check engine light, you're not going to get your plates. You're not going to pass emissions. You know, Colorado, we're basically, unfortunately, we've adopted the CARB standard, and it's being enforced now. And that means that, you know, a lot of these trucks that we did in the past, these Allison trucks, I mean, getting to the point to where, like, they won't pass emissions. You know, guys couldn't get plates because there's a check engine light on the dash because it's missing information from the TCM. So this whole integration, you know, is so incredibly important, you know, for, like, just the livelihood of being able to legally drive your truck and get plates on it. But the other side of it is, I mean, we've got $80,000, $90,000, and $100,000 trucks, right? And the last thing we want to be doing is driving a truck around that half the stuff doesn't work.
Yeah.
You know, so it's just a really big deal. But it's it's incredible. I mean, they just drive so well, and these guys that have had so many failures in the past with their 68s, you know, it's just a blessing for those guys, because, you know, we all have these trucks that are. I mean, the Ram builds such a great truck. You know, they really build such a great truck, and just having the limitation of that transmission, you know, it kills some guys. You know, they just can't get over it. So you know, now it's exciting. You know, this is something that's gonna make a lot of happy truck drivers.
Can I ask a little bit about handling power? Is this something that would be applicable if I want to build a big competition truck that I also daily drive? So a nice hot street truck. Do I have the option to beef this Allison up, or is this, like, because it's so new, I'm kind of just getting like the basic entry level one for failure prone customers?
No, so that's a fantastic question. So I'll answer that in a couple ways. One, so currently we're only offering the kit with the transmission as installs at ATS, and the reason we're doing that, we just need a few more. You know, I need like another 20 or 30 of each truck to go through the shop so we have all the little details hammered out, because we have every single. I mean, first of all, this kit, there is not a single wire that you have to tap. I mean, you don't, and I didn't say cut wires. Like, you don't have to cut any wires, but you don't even have to tap a wire.
Wow.
Everything is 100% plug and play. I mean, everything. Like, the TCM unbolts, and we bolt in our module in place of it. So the translator bolts in the factory mounts. I mean, the TCM under the dash. I mean, every wire is cut exactly to length and loomed. So everything is 100% plug and play. Pretty soon we'll be offering just the kit for all the transmission rebuilders, because there's a ton of guys out there that rebuild Allisons, and they do a great job with it, you know, and I want to give them the ability to you know, put their Allison behind the Cummins, right? So we'll be sending out the kit that would have the bell housing, the torque converter, the extension housing, because we've cast up a new extension housing, so it has so you don't have to use adapter plates and that kind of stuff on the back of the engine. an output shaft, an extended output shaft that's billet, by the way, that's part of the standard base build. And then all the harness and the TCM, so everything you need. If you buy the complete assembly from us, then in our base transmission, the base transmission is designed for basically a 600 horsepower Ram. So all of the Allisons that we, like our base model Ram Allison, comes with the extended billet output shaft. It comes with all the upgraded clutch packs. It's a combination between either Raybestos or Alto. We're going to have a specific blend that we've always used behind the Duramax. And all the hydraulic modifications in the valve body, a bigger pump, and then the 5-star torque converter, of course. And that's the base package. Then at that point, if you're, like your 800, 900, 1,000 horsepower, whatever, then you can start upgrading other components in the transmission, the billet input shaft, billet clutch hub, billet planetary. So it pretty much is like the same build that we would do for the high horsepower Duramaxes. We just kind of stepped it up. Instead of a stage one being like a 500 horsepower unit, we just know that the kind of torque that a Cummins makes, for all these trucks. And frankly, most of these guys a majority of these guys that are upgrading to the Allison, they're the guys that have, gone through multiple Chrysler transmissions, and their engine's tuned up, and, the vehicle's accessoried out. So, we kind of had to assume that most of these Allisons would be going behind relatively modified trucks as it is. So, we just didn't want to take a chance and just make the base model good for 600 horsepower.
I like that.
So, that's awesome.
I like that. Yeah, if you have a Cummins and it's not modified and you're listening to this podcast, what the fuck? That's my real question.
Yeah, right. Exactly. What the hell's wrong with you?
Clint, I know you said this is right now just getting the shop installs. People want to learn more about it. I know our page is going to blow up about it. Fans, please jump on over to Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group. Post about it. We'll make sure we tag Clint in there and get some knowledgeable feedback for you. But for everyone else, where should they go to learn more about this project?
Pretty much the only information we have out currently is a couple videos that I did, and they're not professional, just real short, cell phone videos that I did just to kind of answer a few questions. And you can find that on our YouTube channel. Here shortly, we're in the middle of a huge integration. We're putting a whole new system in the shop, and part of that is our website is being redesigned and upgraded. So when we release, when we make the switch over, which will probably be around, I think, the 15th of next month, that we'll finally be advertising the Allison swap and kind of going through all these details in that. But in the meantime, I think the videos that I did are pretty informative. For the most part, we kind of show the transmission and the castings and how the computer system works. And, one of them I do a test drive and showing all the functionality of it, that at the end of the day that, our base market where we're targeting, right now today, we are not targeting to put an Allison behind a 7.3 and all these other vehicles. There's other guys that do that. Our target has been to make sure that literally all of the 94 to current Ram trucks will have a complete plug and play option to put an Allison in it. So that means if you're taking out your old 47 RH or 47 RE transmission, in the early first gen or second gen Dodges, that we'll have a kit to bolt in. As I said earlier, we really focused on right now the 19 to current Rams, and then the 13 to 18 Rams. We just got that all done, and then next we'll be working on the prior models. So, it's pretty straightforward. Everything's very, very, very clean. So we'll make sure that we get more information out there on the website shortly. But until then, let's check out the videos.
Man, I am so excited. Clint, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, pleasure. Yeah, I always love talking about technology and these products. You guys do a great job, and we really appreciate working with you guys. So anything we can do, in the future, just let me know.
Absolutely. Hey, guys, you heard it here. This Allison conversion is going to be the cleanest one on the market. It's going to be the one that you guys want. If you're right on the fence and you're thinking about doing something, hold off a second. You're going to be able to get yours, and you're going to want this one. Also, listeners, stick around. We got a little bit more Diesel Performance podcast coming at you next. We're going to have our super tech and our remote support expert on talking about doing some troubleshooting in the shop. All right, folks, thanks for sticking around. We're here for your favorite segment with our super tech, Jeremy Garnett. Jeremy, how the hell are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for joining us today. Guys, if you want to follow Jeremy Garnett over on his Instagram page, that's at jgarnett00. Some really cool stuff going on. What have you been working on in the shop lately?
Well, besides this LML, and I started a really cool Hummer project a few weeks back, and been really getting some foot on the ground and making some
big progress.
on it. So
I know whenever you talk to a mechanic, they're like, oh, it's slowly coming along. It's like, bro, you got the cab off, you got the suspension on, you got the intercoolers on. Like, you look like you're damn near done. I get it, though. You don't want to tell the boss that. Then you can't milk the project.
Exactly.
I get it.
If I tell him too much, then, something will happen.
I love that. All right. Well, hey, I know last week we ended with talking to our remote support expert, Sean Lynn. You were putting the emissions back on that 2012 Dually LML, and it was having some EGT issues.
Yeah.
How'd it go? Did you resolve it? Did you fix the problem?
I did. After, talking with Sean last week, stuff like that, he had brought up, the pigtail issues and stuff like that. And I knew there was a couple issues to begin with, but, from his firsthand experience, so I did take everything apart, and I did find a couple corroded wires. So I did put everything back together, and so I got the truck driving, running down the road, and I realized that my EGTs are still staying about 800 degrees. Went into it a little bit more, and I found that we had a bad ninth injector.
Ooh. Now, ninth injector, def injector commonly get mixed up.
Yeah.
Ninth injector, specifically on an LML, I believe on the L5 piece as well.
Yep.
Ninth injector is going to be an extra fuel injector that sprays fuel into the exhaust just before the DOC.
Yep.
If you don't know anything about emissions, this doesn't matter to you. It sprays a little bit of fuel into the exhaust to get the exhaust hot enough to burn off the soot.
Yep.
If you know about emissions, then you know that it actually heats up the DOC, and the DOC heats the DPF.
Yep.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, so what we wanted to do is it wasn't working properly. So it's working about 70%. Ugh. So the truck wanted to go into regen, but it wasn't going into a regen status. So it was just staying at off.
Right.
But it was the soot grams were staying between 18 and 22. And they didn't want to move off of those four, between 18 and 22.
So DPF pressure sensor, or was it actually getting passive regen enough to burn the soot down in that load?
It was passive regen without going into regen status.
Oh, so passive regen, for guys that don't know, passive regen is when you're operating the truck in a way that the truck just gets hot enough to regen. So it'll just burn off the soot with the way you're operating it. Active regen is when it has to spray fuel. I have a guess here. This was somewhere in between.
Yes.
This is like spraying enough fuel to make it regen, to make it run hot, but not enough to kick it all the way into a full active regen.
Yep. So when I went in and I did a manual regen on it, I can get it to go in and do a manual regen, get my soot grams to go down. But the truck wouldn't do it on its own.
Right.
And here, as a tuning company, as in Duramax Tuner, we want the truck to work properly before we even tune it. So you got to remember, this truck is still bone stock without a tune on it.
I know, and every employee is pissed.
Oh, I know. So am I.
I'm not driving it.
I've been driving this truck for 2 weeks, and it still doesn't have a tune on it.
Oh my God.
So, but yeah, it was just staying about 800. We went in, we diagnosed, we found that ninth injector being bad, and I went ahead, I put one in. Thank you, Jamie. He doesn't know yet. But we put in his, we had one laying around, we put that in, and we got the EGTs to go up, stay right around 1150 to 1200 degrees. And as soon as I did that, my EGTs hit that number, went into DPF status, went on, soot grams within a matter of 20 miles went to zero.
That's awesome.
So
it's always satisfying when you get to fix a problem you've been chasing. Like you
Yeah.
really are like, well, I've been banging my head on this one, like, and then it gets done, and you're like, Well, that was easy.
Yeah, and it was all from the beginning, being, the truck comes in, we're like, oh, cool, it's an emissions, equipped truck, and then we found out it's secret deleted, and we have EGT problems, and
I got it. All right. Well, I'll make sure we get a tune on that truck as quick as we can then.
Yeah.
Sounds like it needs a turbo, trans, pump, traction bars, lift pump.
Yeah, we need to make it a race truck.
Yeah. That's the only way to do a dually at Duramax tuner. I dig it. Cool, man. Well, I'm glad to hear that. Any other trucks been in the shop lately?
Well, now that we're on the actual emissions-related problems, we actually had a 14 LML coming as well.
Okay.
Truck actually the customer put all the emissions back on himself. The truck was deleted, and he actually put all the emissions stuff on himself, and then
When did that go wrong?
Well, he brought the truck to us. Everything was unplugged. So everything that has to be unplugged for
deletes.
Deletes.
Okay, so I want to get this right for our listeners. So he had a deleted truck, and he's like, I'm going to return the emissions equipment.
Yeah, he hated the sound. He wanted the truck to be nice, quiet. He just wanted a nice truck.
So he pulls the aftermarket exhaust off of it.
Yep.
I don't know what he had for an EGR kit solution or anything else, but he pulls all of his delete kit off of the truck, puts all of the stock emissions equipment back on. Was it like new stock, or was it like he had it laying around? From
it was like
deleted?
garage kept stock.
Garage kept stock. Good. Okay, so he deleted the truck, had all the parts in his garage.
Yep.
Didn't like the sound anymore. Says, okay, I want to go back to keeping it quiet. Bolts everything back on, but he didn't plug in any of the pigtails.
He did that so he could drive the truck here because he wanted us.
Yeah.
So we had to tune the truck. So if he would have plugged everything in, he wouldn't have been able to drive the truck.
Right.
So, of course, we get here. Well, now we have pigtail issues. So, same thing with Sean. Like he was saying, whoever his buddy deleted it or whatever.
Yeah.
It's saying that, okay, well, none of the connectors were tied up. None of them had dielectric grease. None of them had tape.
Oh.
So, luckily enough, it wasn't very long. It was only about 8 months or so, the guy who had the truck deleted.
Yeah.
So, we didn't have to, we were able to just plug and play.
All right. Well, that's good.
But then we ran into our own issues.
Oh, no.
So, after the truck sat, the injector doser, so the DEF doser.
Oh, DEF injector, sure.
Yeah, DEF injector. So we found out that it was crystallized on the end of the doser, so it would not inject DEF, so we couldn't get the truck to regen.
Oh, no.
So.
Oh, all right. Well, are you still working on it?
No. Yeah. I'm sorry. Well, no as in that, but yes as in we got the truck up and running and driving.
Okay, good. All right, excellent. Well, Super Tech Jeremy, thank you so much for stopping by the show. We really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem.
Listeners, stick around. We're going to have our remote support expert, Sean Lynn, join us in just a moment. Remote support expert, Sean Lynn, how the hell are you?
Great. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us, buddy.
Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Hey, Super Tech Jeremy, got that LML fix we called you about last week.
Oh, awesome. Glad to hear you got it working.
Yeah, man. Yeah. It definitely went through, looked at some pigtails, found some further pigtail issues, kind of just like you had gone through, and got some other things wrapped up. So he had that one. And then he had another emissions equipment return job where he ran into some DEF doser issues. He was able to get it resolved, I'm pretty sure, with an R&R, so pulled the old one out, put the new one in. But I just thought, man, I think a lot of guys run into DEF issues and they have no idea how to solve them. Have you ever dealt with customers that have DEF issues?
Yeah, actually, every now and again we have people calling in with exactly that.
Okay, how do people usually describe the problem? What do they usually call you about if the topic's going to be about DEF?
So usually when we're on that topic, they get a message on their dash saying diesel exhaust fluid quality poor, which means the catalyst is not reducing the nitrogen enough, and it just thinks that the DEF is at fault. But it's just a message that pops up on your dash normally. Okay,
so it's just one of those messages that tells you something is wrong, but maybe isn't always super accurate.
Mm-hmm.
How do you fix it? Delete it?
Well, I mean, not really the way that we would go with it, but it could be a number of different things, to be honest with you.
Lay it on me, man. What should people troubleshoot? I'm calling in right now. I got a DEF quality poor message. What do I do?
I would have to ask if you're getting any other codes with it or if it's just that message.
No other codes, just that message.
Typically, in a situation like that, sometimes if people buy old diesel exhaust fluid that's been sitting too long, sometimes it doesn't bring that number down enough to make the truck happy. Or if you've tried everything, replaced all the fluid, then we'd be looking at hard parts at that point.
Okay. Now, when you say replace the fluid, should I go out and drain the whole tank as soon as I get that message?
Depending on how old the fluid is, I would personally believe that it's always better to drain the old fluid just to make sure that everything is fresh in there, personally. I went through that on my personal truck as well.
Oh, really? What happened on your truck?
The fluid in it was pretty old, so rather than have to worry about it down the road, I just drained it up front and put all fresh fluid in it.
Okay. I mean, it's DEF. It's not like going to break the bank to put a new thing of DEF in there, right? Like they hold less than 2 gallons, so not that big of a deal. Okay, cool. Now you said moving on to hard parts. Do you know any common failure spots, or how would I spot a failed DEF component?
Yeah, it doesn't happen often, but if the DEF injector stops functioning, it will not spray into the exhaust, and that level will never come down in the system, so you might get codes for it or DEF quality poor messages.
Okay, cool. Good stuff, man. Is there anything else people out there should know about their diesel exhaust fluid?
The only thing I recommend is if you don't drive the truck a whole lot, don't top it off. I would recommend running it as low as you can and then filling it.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
If you keep topping off the fluid with fresh stuff, then you still have a lot of older stuff at the bottom potentially, and you can run into messages like this on your dash.
Oh, good heads up. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for stopping by the show, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Listeners, stick around. Chris and I will be wrapping up this show here in just a moment.
Paul, what an amazing show today, man.
You said it. Absolutely. You know, Chris, sometimes we plan our shows weeks in advance, and sometimes we shoot an email out 2 days or a day before a show starts. This is one I'm not scared to say we put almost no planning into, and
this was a Tuesday morning. Hey, we should do this, this, and this, and you CC'd me in a couple emails.
And Wednesday we recorded it. You guys are hearing it Friday. And one of the reasons that it was so easy to put this show together this week was that it's something we were both super interested in, and something we have a passion about following.
There's an industry demand for something like this, and I think it takes someone really passionate to be able to execute that. And I think that as you see companies and products be developed, those key products that are super successful have that recipe. And I have to say, any of our listeners listening to Clint talk about the process and talk about the R&D piece and the efforts and everything that went into it, you can believe that he does care, that he did look at all the different avenues and the different obstacles that needed to be overcome to be able to come with a product to go to market that's going to do exactly what it needs to, that is desired. So I'm really excited to see what the next year holds as these kits start getting circulated in the space and guys start getting them on the trucks. We have the opportunity to play with one and drive one firsthand, because I've seen a ton of conversions over the years where anyone can convert and do something and hack something together, but all of the creature comforts of that vehicle just tend to not really work, but that's overlooked because it's a conversion.
Right.
So it's cool to see a factory type fitment and finish of a conversion product go to market. So really pumped to see that.
Absolutely. Listeners, next week we're going to have a whole lot more awesome interviews, and we'll be hearing back from our super tech along with our along with our remote support expert for this week. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Hemke.
Thanks for listening. Chris!
Why did you just yell?
I don't know. Let's do it again.
Why am I yelling?